the month where we join with hundreds of other Unitarian Universalist congregations across the country to mark the beginning of the church year with a water communion, mingling water with all members returning to their faith community after a busy summer, and that includes members of all ages. So as we listen to music, you are invited to come forward and choose a bowl or bowls that best represent the state of your spirit. And we all come to this community with different experiences, different states of the heart. And so I invite you to honor yours and to honor where you are at by choosing a bowl that represents where you are in this moment, whether that is happiness, grief, refreshment, or anticipation. And yes, you can choose more than one. Now, you may notice that some members will have brought a small jar of water that represents their summer, perhaps from travel or from a loved one's home or from a puddle on a memorable day. So if you see friends come up and pour water that they brought, consider asking them at coffee hour where it came from and what it means to them. And if you did not bring water from home, we have water in the pitchers up here. Like all water, it has been everywhere. It has taken every form, and it can represent what you need it to. And so I'm going to invite our worship assistants to come forward. And to share with us what each of the vases mean that you can choose from. And we'll start with Pat.
The waters poured into this bowl represents moments of joy and happiness. This is the water of summertime, the youthful energy that makes us want to laugh and dance and celebrate, the love that fills our hearts until our faces hurt from smiling too much.
Oh, yep.
Oh. There we go. Good catch. The waters poured into this bowl are the storm waters of grief and loss. These are the rains of autumn that nourish us when we are adrift or when our hearts are broken. If grief for personal loss or for the world is in your heart today, this water is calling to you.
The waters added to this bowl are the waters of stillness, equanimity, and peace. This is the quiet of water, the ice that endures, the tranquil straws that fall on the evergreens. If you yearn today for stillness and peace, this water is calling to you.
Finally, the waters added to this bowl are the rushing waters of transition and change. This is the energy of spring, of new life, sudden growth, bubbling effervescence. It is the wonder of a child seeing the world for the first time, the breath of fresh experiences, the uncertainty of new things, the shedding of the unnecessary, the butterfly coming out of its chrysalis and learning to fly.
And so as you come forward, choose the bowl that best represents where your spirit arrives from, and thus join together in community. And now we are gathered, our community has come home. Now, some of you may be familiar with this fable. It comes from Aesop, and it's a classic. The north wind and the sun had a quarrel about which of them was stronger. And while they were disputing with much heat and bluster, a traveler passed along the road wrapped in a cloak. "Let us agree," said the sun, "that he is stronger who can strip the traveler of his cloak." "Very well," growled the north wind, and at once set a cold, howling blast against the traveler. With that first gust of wind, the ends of the cloak whipped around the traveler's body, but he immediately wrapped it more closely around himself, and the harder the wind blew, the tighter he held on to his cloak. The north wind tore angrily at the cloak, but all of his efforts were in vain. Then the sun began to shine. His beams were gentle, and the pleasant warmth after the cold bitterness of the north wind was a welcome relief. The traveler unfastened his cloak and let it hang loosely from his shoulders. The sun's rays continued to fall pleasantly and softly on the traveler. Soon the man took off his cap and wiped his brow, and finally he pulled off his cloak and sat under a tree. It wasn't force that won the day, but rather a gentleness that brought about a yielding. Now, our culture tends to emphasize toughness as the way to get through life. We have lots of sayings that get at this. We want hard bodies, strong minds, tough wills, hard as nail determination, rugged personalities, and a sturdy character. And it goes deeply within the American imagination, too. The idea of the rugged frontier and the need to prevail and conquer continues to shape our language and our ideals. The rugged individual changes their circumstance rather than being changed by it. And if they are changed by it, it is to create a harder shell and a tougher demeanor. Now, my best friend, who is the minister at the Highland Park Presbyterian Church, he is an avid practitioner of jiu-jitsu. Now, I know very little about martial arts. I've never practiced them myself. And I guess I had a bit of a stereotype about them, imagining that they were about the use of strength and force to overcome an opponent. And some of them are. But recently, as I was talking to my friend, he mentioned something that caught my attention. He said that the term jiu-jitsu can be translated into English as the way of softness. The way of softness. I then asked him what that has to do with the martial art, and he said that a lot of the practice is about deflecting an opponent's attacks. Rather than attacking with ferocity and force, it is about using restraint in order to disarm. Now, there's a similar concept in yoga. It comes from the Yoga Sutras, which is the foundational text of a lot of yoga practice. It's about 2,000 years old. And it has this concept in it of sthira sukha. The literal translation is strength, softness. And many interpret it to mean finding strength in softness. Rather than forcing postures, it is about discovering the power that comes through an easier, gentler approach. And in yoga, you learn that it is through ease that the body opens. It is not through force. Using force can cause the body, can cause the muscles to lock up. And then if you continue to push through their locking up, the muscles often tear and you become injured. But if you approach the posture with gentleness, with softness, and allow the muscles to ease into the pose, that's when you find opening and you can deepen the posture. This truth that there is a strength in gentleness applies to our hearts and our spirits as much as it applies to our bodies. Kristen Neff is a psychologist whose research has focused on the concept of self-compassion. And what she has found is that when we are hard on ourselves, when we try to punish ourselves for having certain feelings, we tend to get stuck. There is no possibility for movement or for change. The feelings don't go away and the experience doesn't get resolved. Rather, we get caught in an adversarial relationship with our history. But when we use self-compassion, when we find ways to gently approach the experiences that led us to feel a certain way, then we can find more opening and ease and possibility for change. Neff writes that self-compassion can sound nice, but vague. A lot of people would like to be more compassionate to themselves, but are not sure how to put it into practice. So one of the tools that she suggests is noting the tone of voice we use with ourselves. Often that voice can be much harsher than a voice that we would use with most anyone else. That voice may recite a litany of ways that we are not good enough, how we are such a disappointment, or how we should have known better. Neff encourages people to try to shift that voice to the same one that we would use with a closest friend or with loved ones. Finding that nurturing voice isn't just a nice thing to do, she writes. Instead, Neff argues that it can be the very thing that allows us to find courage, ease, and a willingness to change. This is how she puts it. Whenever I notice something about myself that I do not like, whenever something goes wrong in my life, I silently repeat the following phrases. This is a moment of suffering. Suffering is a part of life. May I be kind to myself in this moment. May I give myself the compassion that I need. I love that. I think that is powerful. I think that is needed. It is also a kind of gentleness and compassion that we can extend beyond the self. Several years ago, the religious historian Karen Armstrong gave the keynote lecture at the General Assembly. And her lecture was about religious and political violence, which is one of her research focuses. She's written a tremendous amount about this and has given a lot of thought to these entrenched political and religious conflicts that we human beings face. And after the lecture, someone asked her how we can enter into these conversations that are rife with disagreement. How can we enter into those conversations in a way that could make a difference? And I thought it was interesting what she didn't say. She didn't say that we need to educate more or fight for ideals or convince people to believe a certain way. Instead, she said that the best thing we could do with each other is to ask, what hurts? Just the simple question, what hurts? She believes that gentleness and compassion have the best shot at making a difference, because it is only when we are willing and able to be vulnerable that we are open and honest enough to create change together. Now, at the end of the day, I don't know how much of a difference that's going to make politically. There seems to be very little opportunity for dialogue, however it is framed. But I also don't think that we have to start there. We can begin with finding that gentleness within ourselves. We can extend it to others within this community. We can practice it in our own lives. And perhaps then it will grow beyond the circles of what we know, beyond our dreaming and our hopes, even beyond differences, until it makes the toughest circumstances yield, like water or like sunshine. As the poet Jeremy Radin put it, I feel something rise up, something older and angrier than I am, and I find that I must remain soft. I must be committed to softness, must commit myself every moment to softness, must water my plants and sit in my room and imagine how soft I will be, how terribly soft, until it is a softness that moves out in circles and back into the world. May your heart soften. May your spirit find gentleness. May you be held in love. Amen.